welcome everybody. So it is wonderful to have Dr. Pagan here, and I'll go through a brief thing about the consortium and its event and lay out the ground rule, introduce him, and then I'll outline some of the areas that we might be touching on. And this is going to be around 50 to say 60 minutes. And after that, Prakash ji and Jingjing will take over and interact with the chat. So that's the kind of a protocol we have. And Jose, this is a very conversational, informal thing, and just be yourself and share your wisdom. So before I get into the program itself, just to let you know that this is organized by the Nepalsa Center of the University of New Mexico's Himalayan Policy Research Conference. We began this center in 2005 in order to do just this, to bring out scholars like you, share knowledge, so the people from both sides of the continent in Asia, as well as in North America, up and coming young scholars will benefit. And we hold annual conferences in December. And then we also have a graduate seminar in the summer. And then we also have this event, bringing people like you to share research or any other thing that we find useful for our audience. And that's what we do. And finally, we also have a publication portal that the consortium puts out. So anyway, so let me introduce Jose first, but then I'll be spending about an hour explaining his vita. So I'll make it very short. You can go and read his thing on his profile. He's a very prolific scholar. And what excites me about him having here is that he is a very well-rounded scholar from the angle of academic as well as policy, and also a lot of technical thing. And he has done a lot of different things. So I'll kind of go over that very quickly. So currently, Jose is the professor and chair of the Department of Public Health Policy and Management in the School of Global Public Health at NYU. And he's also chair of the board of directors of NYC Health Plus Hospital, the largest public healthcare system in the US. And he received his PhD from the University of New Mexico. And he has led a tremendous amount of projects, research, implementations, evaluation projects, and so on. And over the years, his research work has been funded through grants and contracts. That's the topic today. From the Department of Defense, the Agency for Healthcare Research and Quality, NIH, you name it, and Robert Wood Johnson, just to name a few. So he has published about 150 articles, several books, and he's on several editorial boards. But his grant funding is quite impressive. That's what we want to learn from him, that how young scholars who are attending today can learn from him, the strategy, how to be successful. And that's what we're looking forward to. So he has handled more than 24 grants, including totaling millions of dollars, including one, which is like $100 million of this grant project he did in the New York City. If he finds it interesting to share, he will elaborate that a bit later. Anyway, this is the summary of his qualification: his high quality research, grant writing success, successful career move. That's another inspirational story I really want to get out of him, that how he moved from sort of Puerto Rico to Iowa State to UNM to Pan American University all the way to NYU. So that'll be very inspirational story that we'd like to hear from him. So let me begin by asking Jose, you are from Puerto Rico, if I'm not mistaken, right? And small island state or territory, I don't know what we call it. And how you got here, tell us a little story and how you got interested in economics or health economics. And then follow-up question.
thank you, Alok. It's an honor, it's a pleasure to be here with all of you. I mean, I grew up in Puerto Rico. I don't know if you look at a map, you know, it's a very small island in the middle of the Caribbean. It's since part of the U.S. since 1898, and I grew up in a small town in the North Coast called Manatí. And then, you know, basically the way probably many of you have migrated, right? You knew someone in your town that went to school somewhere else. And in my town, some people went to Ohio State. So I had a friend that went to Ohio State, and I became interested in Ohio State, and I ended up there, did math, did economics, spent too much time drinking coffee and thinking about how to apply or combine math and economics, and then had a chance through a mentor to actually go west. And one of my mentors at Ohio State was actually from New Mexico, and said, you know, you should come check it out. So I went out there. I went to a department chair. He gave me a job. I remember that vividly. And then I stayed there. And over there, I did some health, but it was mostly labor economics. Labor economics were actually work on a paper on obesity when I was there, and employment. I was very curious about how health conditions like obesity, diabetes, blood pressure, how they impact people and the jobs they have. And that's how I got into health economics. Many of us have family members with some of those health conditions, and it may impact how you view life and how you do things. And that became sort of like my main interest. I did work on immigration there, looking at immigration reform in the US. And then an opportunity came up because of my main dissertation advisor. He was actually from South Texas. There was an opportunity to move to South Texas. I was doing immigration and border work. So it made sense that my first job was to move to South Texas. And I was at the university. Back then it was called University of Texas Pan American. Now it's called UT Rio Grande Valley. So
Jose, just to
yeah,
interview, I'll be doing that just
please.
to move things along.
Yeah.
I find it interesting that how you started with the micro labor person onto health. I mean, you're doing totally types of things, right?
Yeah, I did, you know, in economics, you look at problems of health as health impacting something else like employment, jobs, wages, productivity. In health, you do it the other way around, you know, context and so on impacts your health. So when I was at the University of Texas Pan American, I spent time with a professor that was in sociology that had a lot of grants and projects collecting data on people in the border region. And she needed somebody that knew statistics and econometrics, and I picked up some ideas when I was at UNM on that area. And it proved useful because she would pay for my summers to just run a bunch of logistic and regression and probing models and so on.
So just kind of summarize your thought.
Yeah.
Kind of a connection between sort of a labor economics and the transition was not that difficult for you, right? Because you were probably, you know, well-trained in statistical technique and micro theory. So moving on to the main questions I have from our audience, and then I'll have some of mine, and then we'll go to the chat. Okay. So there are several types of question here. One is the targeting funding sources. Then there's a couple of questions about how to involve students. Then some question about the institutional grant. So let's begin with the two questions that came to us about the targeting the funding sources, right? So for example, it would be really great to hear from you the approach that you might think that'll be useful to get the big name funding programs interested, such as NSF, USAID, NIH, and any other federal agencies like NIH.
Yeah, I mean, there are several strategies you could follow. One is if you are early career, then you want to find out at your institution, basically what kind of seed funding do they have, pilot funding. You got to start somewhere. So you got to start getting those lines in your resume, your CV that say, I took $5,000. I wrote a paper with it and I was able to manage that well, because that means the next when you apply for something for $20,000 or $10,000, people will trust that you'll be able to complete the project and so on. So there are funding sources at your institution that you could take advantage of. There also maybe one thing that I did, for example, is find out who is really good at doing this in the institution that I'm in. You could go to the research office and find, or go to your department chair and so on, and ask them, who are the folks that are really doing work that is funded, and then see how they have done it. Many, if the funding is federal, they may have identified your school and some people in your area that they like to fund because, you develop a reputation there. But it could also be a private funder. It could be a foundation or a business that decides that your university, they want to put their money in your university. And that took me a while actually to figure out. So for example, Robert Wood Johnson Foundation will fund, they fund all over the place, research all over the place in the US, but there's certain universities and areas that they tend to have better hit rates than others. And it varies by state and by city and by country.
So Jose, so I'll come back to that
Yeah.
idea again. A lot of people are very much interested in it, but
Yeah.
To summarize what you're saying is start small. Like
Yes.
you started with $1,000 grant and then went all the way to 100 million,
Yes.
right? So it didn't happen
Yes.
overnight, correct?
Yes.
So the idea is to have a good track record, meaning you get a small grant, convert that into publication so that they see the track record that you can deliver, right?
Yep.
Now,
Even as a student, publish, publish. When you start, people are looking at a combination of papers and or reports and small grants,
So just as a follow-up to that, many of our members
Yes.
are trying to reach out in Asia, right?
Yeah.
And so for them, some of the issue they raise is that when they try to approach these funding agencies, let's say in the US or even global, they even don't reply their email, right? Their problem. And what they were saying was, would it help if they had a collaborator in the US or North America, right? So, I mean, what would you suggest to them that they do?
It always helps if you know somebody at the organization or institution that you're trying to build a connection with, whether it is a funder or a university. So for example, if I want to contact somebody at UNM, even from here, it's always easier if I ask Dr. Bohara and I say, Dr. Bohara, do you happen to know person X? And then that sort of like facilitate that communication. One thing that I've noticed that people do, especially early career, is like they may contact someone and they give you information that it feels like homework, as I call it. I want this, I need this, here's what I want to do. And it becomes confusing. So what you could do to approach, let's say you approach me, this is the way that my brain thinks. You send me an email that says, hey, I'm doing some interesting work in this region on this topic. Can we talk? Or can we, don't tell me everything you want to do in an email, because I get like tons of emails, and it's the same with anybody in the US. And if they don't know you, you just ignore it.
Jose, would there also be, at least I also get lots of email like that, but I can see sometimes the cultural gap in terms of the approach, right? I think we could do a whole another podcast on that, right? How to approach scholars or the institution in the US or in the Western world from developing world context. So there's a whole new approach, like for example, the way I deal with in the American system is you got to be very direct and it has to be deliverable. They need to see what you can bring to the table, right? So with that, just to move on, a couple of questions about the students' involvement. So our audience wanted to know any suggestion for recent PhDs. Like a lot of them have, gone on the tenure track position. So, any PhD folks that we have new, any writing grants application tips you may have for the new PhDs?
I mean, like many times your institution may have workshops that help you develop your writing skills. I mean, you could, having some structure helps you. So if your institution have a process where there's a working group and they get together, it doesn't matter what they're doing, but that it forces you to sort of like every week write a piece and have other people that read it. That's critical. So one of the things that is important in grant writing is that you sort of like you want to write. It's very different from writing a technical paper because you have to think about the audience as basically being anyone that is relatively competent should be able to understand what you're trying to say. So the best person to read your proposal, if you're an economist, is going to be a non-economist. There's going to be somebody that is different from you because they can come back to you and say, I'm unclear as to what you're trying to say here. And it's opposite from the way we're trained as a recent PhD, right? Because we're trained to be very narrow and very, very specialized in what we do. And it's just exactly the opposite. I used to fail for that reason, actually, a lot, because I would put all these equations and all of that, trying to sound smart, and it didn't help me at all, because people couldn't understand what I was trying to say.
I think, Jose, I think that makes sense, your answer, because when I looked at your portfolio of grant, you have a very technical agent-based modeling. Then you also have awareness type research and projects. Then you also did like the use of tools and technology, as well as the policy. So you covered all four important areas. Sometimes we make a mistake taking just one, kind of a one pony trick or whatever they call it. So you have done all four different. So can you shed some light on those?
Yeah, I mean, opportunities keep changing over time. And when they come to you, if you get invited by someone to a party and you show up, you will keep getting invited to that party. And that's the way this works. And if you say no, maybe the next time they won't invite you and you won't even know. So it's similar, if you get invited to work on a project, even if you are interested, show up, figure it out, and then find a role for yourself in that. And that's what I do on projects. Some projects I do highly technical work, in some other ones I organize the activity, I find experts to do the work.
So Jose, that leads me to another sort of follow-up idea just came to me, is that obviously, writing a technical paper, you've done that, right? You've published several of those. Then you moved on to different types of areas where I clearly see need for you to reach out to other disciplines, right?
Yes.
So can you sort of shed some light as to how you go about approaching other disciplines and other areas to make it multidisciplinary?
What I'll say is, in any topic you get into, especially in your early career, you sort of like don't skip any steps. So if you're an economist and you get a tenure track assistant professor position, or political science, or whichever field you're in, then create a name, even, write a few things that people know you in that area, that you're very good at it. And then as you expand knowledge in that area, then that's when you start bringing other partners, because like one of the things that, for example, like in some fields, you're expected to do everything. But when you want to scale it to a large project, many people expect, like, just because you know how to do statistics, maybe even better than the person that you could have as a consultant in statistics, what people are looking for is that you have someone that will help you if you get stuck in the project on that specific area. And you could say that about the same about agent-based modeling, or qualitative data collection. So what you do is you think about a project that you're trying to do and what are the skills that you need to get that work done competently. If you, at the beginning with a small grant, you do it all, because that $1,000 is only for you and your student, let's say. But as you scale, you have to get from the mindset of, oh, I'm going to do everything. If you're doing something clinical that is about children and clinical care, you probably should have a pediatrician in your project, and so on. If you're doing something in engineering, get an engineer on your project.
So Jose, I
Yeah.
would like to hear some example on that, but please to the audience,
Yes.
please send a question on the chat line and we'll cover them later. So please keep asking questions because I may not be able to cover everything, but I got a lot of questions. I'm just putting it together. So Jose,
Yes.
I want to ask you about the institutional funding, but before I do that, any idea about the institutional funding for an organization like this consortium, right? It is the group of individual, they came together young. And so I would like to know if there's any institutional grant. I'm not saying, the precise source, but some might shed some light on that's in a minute, but I want to kind of go to this cross-fertilization thing you just spoke of, which is, if you don't know everything, of course, you need to work with some other people. I'd like to hear your opinion with examples. Give us some precise example, how you did that collaboration and what project it was and how you got it funded. So, interdisciplinary team, right? Because these days we hear a lot about interdisciplinary research that NIH is looking for, right? So can you give us an example how you put together a team, what was the topic, and so can you sort of give actual example of your project building effort?
Yeah, I had a project recently where we were looking at coordination of social services, people needing housing or food or transportation, somebody to deliver meals at home within the healthcare delivery system within a clinic. So you go to a doctor and the doctor says, you need transportation and food, and this agency would provide those services. And I approach it from, I did the work connected to, does this program work? Does it reduce hospitalizations and so on? But I also had a biomedical engineer that did agent-based modeling, and he would take that data and the insights and then build a model, like a simulation model that would say, if you provide people with transportation and food and so on, this is how much you can reduce hospitalizations based on a given population. And so it had an element of the science, the research there, but it also had an element of like, can this be a tool? Can this be a web page or a system that you can go in and in your community figure out like what are the services you need and the impact that they will have. So it's a matter of like sort of like one of the things that I've learned quickly on these things at the beginning is layout. Don't spend too much time thinking about the details of what you want to do, and we tend to focus on the details and get lost. Like focus on what is the main idea that you want to do and spend a lot of time on that. And then once you know that, then the rest is very easy to write. So many times when I work on a project, I may give someone, let's say that we're working, all of us, this is a big team, so all of us are working on a project. I may listen to a call or a meeting, write down what I heard, and then I will go one by one with each of you, and I'll say, is that what you want to do? And is that sentence summarizes what you want to do? Once I know everybody agrees to it, then you sort of like go into the details.
So in that process,
yeah,
do you take that outline, let's say big picture outline, and go to the sort of a desk officer of the agency and get their feedback first before building the team, or you build a team and go to them to see if this would be of
it could be, if I have a general idea, I could go to it's a great point. So I'll say, okay, so if it's a government agency, they'll have a program officer and you can see if it fits into a call for proposals that they have, right? So that you could do that. If it's a foundation, like a private foundation or somebody that has money, one thing that I've done is, if I know a foundation is funding something, I approach them and I say, I want to learn more about the work you're doing in this area. I don't pitch an idea. I just say, tell me more about food insecurity. I want to learn about what you're doing in food insecurity. And then if I see a connection, because what happens is, if I'm doing work in food insecurity as a foundation, I'm going to know the other foundations that are doing food insecurity. So the worst that could happen is that you find out what other people are funding, are working in the same space. So you don't lose anything by talking to them as you suggested and saying, here's the area that I'm working on. But again, the same idea, you keep it as the problem. The first conversation is about the problem. You know, there's high food insecurity in this corner of New York. And because they want to be involved too. They want to be, okay, have you thought about this or that? And then you get ideas and then figure out, who do I need to?
Jose, have you, just curious, have you ever done a cold call, right? Sometimes, let's say you saw somebody working on this fantastic project and you thought you could contribute to that, right? And then some idea and that person's work could bring about a better research idea. Have you ever done, just call them up and say, look, you're working on this, I have this idea, can we write, cold call, you don't know the person.
Yeah, I mean, you don't say, I haven't done like I say, okay, I want to work on that. I just say, hey, I find your work very interesting. Can we talk about it? And then once you talk to them, then whether you're sending a proposal or they are, you figure out a way of how to work with them. But yeah.
So you've done such approach, right? You called somebody, found some interest, and so that's not a bad idea.
Well, I mean, let's say you have a project where you send a grant. We have a project, for example, we send a grant and they say that they want an expert in diabetes management for whatever reason. And you know one that is doing similar work to that, then your best bet to get the project funded is to go to the best person that can do that. And you want to get that person in your project. Sometimes too, if you're working in an area that you pretty much know everyone that is doing that because it's a narrow area for whatever reason, sometimes you may want to talk to them to build a team so that they don't compete with you, because it's going to be a better team and a better project if you work together with the best minds that can help you solve that problem. That happens in states, like a state may have a call for a project and pretty much who's going to compete for it because there are only 3 schools in the state. Then you may want to talk to them and say, can we work together?
So Jose, so is there any difference in the approach you take, let's say NIS versus some local policy agency?
I think the foundations.
Foundation.
I think with government, they'll have like clear. I'll talk about 3 different ones. One is like, let's say NIH or NSF. They'll tell you what they want.
I see.
And then what you need to do is read every single point and look at the criteria that they're going to evaluate it. So I'm a reviewer, right? Let's say I'm going to be told by the agency, you're going to review this based on these 5 points. So that's what you got to focus on, follow the instructions, hit the 5 points, because all I'm going to be looking in the proposal is, did you address those 5 points? That's it. If it's a foundation and it's more open, like they may want to fund you or not, then you don't go, you tell them about the problem in general, because you want to engage them in a conversation. And what they typically do is they'll say, send me a page on this. And then they'll go back to you if they like it, and they'll say, send me something. I want to see the details. Send 5 pages. And before you know it, then they'll say, send me another, those 5 pages, take it back to a page and give me a budget. Then you got it. But it's important to engage them, because if you go to someone that has money and you say, this is what I want to do, you're not giving them the chance to work with you. And it's something that again, I learned over the years on how to do that.
You basically saying you tailor your queries according to their needs, instead of saying that this is what I want to do. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, I mean, if let's say that, Alok, you're interested in solving world hunger, or provide insurance coverage to people, I don't go up to you and say, here, I want your money to do what I want.
I see.
I ask you, I tell you, Alok, there's a lot of people hungry or uninsured, and I'm trying to figure it out. Here's some thoughts I have. What do you think? And then based on what you tell me, I'm going to say, I'm going to go back and tell you, that's what we should do. Because you have some ideas on how to solve it, and you have to do it together. Otherwise, you won't be interested. I have no way of knowing what you're interested in until I talk to you.
So you, Jose, you talked about the reaching out to interdisciplinary teams, starting small, keeping a track record, and finding any little opportunities to build your resume. Okay, but then when you got to the position where you could manage large grants, I saw like a $10 million, $9 million, $100 million. So suddenly you are talking about interdisciplinary team from clinical, psychologists to public policy people to economists. So how do you manage this big team and their egos? What's the pros and cons of, and you've been very successful because I've dealt with a couple of your colleagues. They think very highly of you, which is very
thank you.
For the staff to say, anyway. So you manage a big group.
I mean, there are several ingredients. I guess one is I spend a lot of time. I don't like big meetings, like to because I feel like it goes in many different directions. I like to talk to people individually and figure out what they want, and then I have an ability to sit down and figure out and put it all together, and then I'll have a meeting and say, here's what I heard from everyone. So it's inclusive, but it's also I try not to let the conversations go into directions that I cannot address. That's one element. Another one is like good support. To me, it's having a good program coordinator, program director,
I see.
people that are organized, that follow up. It's critical in anything you do. So our success is based on the people that help us in projects. So if you spend a lot of time picking that person or that team, everything else is easy. And then you empower them, because you trust them.
Jose, see, the other question is, let's say you have a very large team, you got a good project. Now, an agency like NIH, sometimes whenever we think of grant, we always think, oh, we got to have a very fantastic new idea, innovative, all that. So we have this little terminology, we all economists are delta improvement, right? Tiny change. So if there's already an issue and the problem, does NIH, does it need a big leap, big innovation, or tiny change might work? I mean,
that's a great question. And I guess what I'll say is, because they're looking at that there's a tendency by federal agencies to fund things that are going to work in some way or that lead to something. So they make safe investments in some ways. And so they want to see that the idea is feasible and so on. So they're looking at the team you put together, that the idea will improve something, but it cannot be, you cannot go in with an idea that is so out of the box that implies extremely high risk. Like, for example, you say, I want to put together a system so that a doctor will know in a clinic whether a patient is at high risk for homelessness. And if you have never done anything like that, of developing like an algorithm or integrate different sources of data, nobody's going to believe you. So you have to put together a team that has worked together maybe before, as to the extent possible, most people, that you base the advancement that you're proposing on past work you've done. That's why pilot data and preliminary data is important. If you say you're going to do a survey of 10,000 people and you have never done a survey of 100 people, why would I give you the money to do it? And that's the way reviewers would look at it, at projects. So And that's why for things that you haven't done, you could have things you haven't done in a project, but then what you do is you find someone that has done it.
I see. That's
Uh,
what you were
yeah,
talking about, the cross-fertilization or
yeah,
interdisciplinary
yeah,
aspect in the research.
yeah.
So that's a
So,
good one.
and many times I think when you're early career, you think, like, for example, I may tell you, for this project, you may want to put Dr. Bohara at 5% on the project or a few hours a year. And they're like, why? What is he going to do? Well, it turns out that because you're proposing something that requires econometrics, it would be good to have someone, if you get stuck, to be able to help you for a few hours a year. And that makes a huge difference on especially your early career. People want to see that if you get stuck, you have somebody that can help you.
So basically what you're saying, Jose, is that even if you're in an early career, fresh PhD, you could put together a team to make your proposal idea attractive.
Yeah, and ask, you just ask people, like, can you help me with this, or there's a book that I read recently called Rejection Proof. You should look at it. Rejection Proof. It's about, have you seen it? Or but it's about how to it's about this guy that goes through these exercises of asking silly things from people. Can I play soccer in your backyard? Kick a ball. And then one of the things he learned through this process, people go like, what are you talking about? If somebody knocks on your door and asks that request. And one of the things he learned is that when people tell you no, you ask them why not. And it opens an opportunity for conversation and so on. So it's similar, we are afraid of people, what they think, their stature. Just ask them. And if they tell you no,
yeah, so
why not?
Rejection is a factor of academics life, right? That's what you say.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. So that
papers.
brings
How many
me,
papers have you got rejected or proposals?
So that brings me to the final segment, which is I call rapid fires.
Yep.
So I'll have some questions, just 1 or 2 lines or more if you like. So in all your grant writing successes, in terms of multi-million, all that, what was the rejection rate?
80%.
80% rejection. So
yes.
Okay. So 20% success, 80% rejection.
Yeah.
So did the rejection come in your earlier career or the latter?
You get better over time, but you still get rejections.
Okay. So
early was 90%, 80,
okay, 95%. So you are the chair of the NYU global program, you yet get rejection. Is that what you're saying?
Oh yeah, that's the story of my life. Yeah.
Okay.
But people don't remember you for your rejections. That's the beauty of it. This is not baseball, batting average.
Yeah.
People remember you for the things that got funded.
Absolutely. And even the journals, they advertise their rejection ratings, right? Like I remember journal basically came back in one of our rejection letters saying, unfortunately, thanks for submitting all that. Our acceptance rate is 6%, so it didn't fall there. So I was like, okay, 6% we didn't.
When I find it interesting. Many people freak out when they hear from a journal saying, we didn't accept it, and they have many comments. And I always tell folks, hey, did they say no or rejected it? Then that's a good outcome. That's the outcome you want.
Yeah.
Because the editor is going to reject it if they think the idea is bad. I mean, why would they give you another chance?
So next question I have is, can you give us a 1 or 2 line or a couple of minutes of your most exciting project experience and tell us about it a little bit that you felt really happy or, satisfied?
When the Affordable Care Act came around 2010, I put a proposal for a Healthcare Innovation Award. And that was a $7.3 million project. And we were helping people that are in assisted living, independent living, in nursing homes, stay at home instead of going to a hospital. So we had to integrate data. This is the point people were talking about data integration from Medicare, from the hospitals and the nursing homes. So the complexity of the project was very interesting and rewarding because of the impact you were having on the people too, on the people you were serving to. So that was a big project.
So basically, you're kind of getting satisfaction by having your project making a difference, right?
Yeah, I mean, I think at the end of the day, that's you should always look at everything that way. I mean,
yeah,
and
so
keep that very
next,
focused.
yeah, thank you. So next rapid fire question is, what's the next interesting idea you're thinking about working on? I'm not talking about all the things you've done. I mean,
yes, I'll tell you what.
Just to know your thinking process, right?
Yeah,
what is that you're thinking next?
So I'm board chair for the health system. We have 45,000 employees, 10,000 nurses, huge system. And because of COVID, equity is a big thing that has come out of COVID. And I've seen how having a diverse board of directors and diversity at the leadership level, how that impacts what an organization does. So I'm very interested in finding out how can we get leaders in health systems in the US to diversify the workforce, understanding the importance of diversity, equity, and inclusion. And I think many people in positions of leadership, what I've noticed is they freeze. They know what's right. They know they have to do something, but they don't do it. They get to there's some fears in there. So I would love to know how can I train or develop a leadership program so that a chair of a board of directors, a CEO of a hospital makes these difficult decisions, what they may seem difficult. So maybe a bunch of interviews and workshops and so on that, but they could have a huge impact. Yeah, huge impact.
So I recently read a paper where they analyze all the words being used in like a board meeting.
Yeah.
To find out the pattern, the choice of words used, and they can do the pattern recognition and find out where they even could predict the stock market based on the type of discussion they do or the turnover. So I think that, anyways, the angle might be an interesting one.
Yeah, and I think that part of it is this idea of it applies to proposals too. Diversity of ideas. You need to have a very diverse team to come up with interesting ideas because you may have, if you just have people from one area looking at a problem, the solutions are very narrow connected to that area. If you have surgeons looking at a problem, guess what's going to happen to the program that you're going to develop? It's going to be about surgery. Somebody's going to get surgery.
Yeah. So a couple of last sort of a rapid fire question I have. I leave at the end. Do you have any recommendation for organization like HPRC that's trying to reach out and build these kinds of knowledge platform where such an organization can look for funding? What will be the strategy? If you want to,
I mean, I was involved with an organization called Interdisciplinary Association for Population Health Science, IAPHS, and that may be an interesting example. I was involved early on. There were people interested in population health, and we started by doing events like this, having everybody donated something, and that's the way we run the operation at the beginning. I don't know if you're doing it that way or not at the beginning, but then after that we went after like institutional members, like universities and so on, departments, thinking a lot about value. Am I providing something of value? Can I get the members, let's say everybody here, information so that they could go to their chairs or their deans and say, you should pay a fee to keep the organization going. And then, I don't know, I mean, I'm thinking about like things like are there companies that are interested in the research that is produced or anything like that you can go back and say, yeah, you're developing investigators in different areas.
Or even given the intercontinental nature of the scholarly platform, one could even go to, let's say, Asian Development Bank or World Bank, or even USAID to say, you know, this is something we're doing here. Maybe you can support to run an organization like this.
Could be a university that is looking to increase faculty doing certain lines of research, and you become the broker of that because you have access to that population. You know, it could be investigators looking at researching in different parts of the world. You know.
Sure.
It could be a company looking for talent and partners, you know. It's hard. I'm not saying that it's easy, of course. It's very hard, but.
Sure. Jose, then I have come to the final two. And first, I'll ask you, you've been very prolific in terms of publication, editorial board, policy debate, and you got a very wide range of them. I'm very happy to see you flourish such a wonderful way. And then how do you create a work-life balance, right? You got a couple of kids?
Yeah. I have 3 daughters. Yeah, I don't know. You just have to balance it out. You know, you do your work and so on, but then you just make sure that you spend a lot of time with your family.
Yeah.
And
sounds good.
Yep.
We all face that, and we also have. I think not one formula fits everybody. So I think we all have to figure that out. That's great.
Yeah.
So here's the final rapid fire question. I know you lived in New Mexico for how many years?
3 years. 3 years.
3 years. Okay. We always face this question in terms of our preference in New Mexico. Whenever we go to a restaurant,
I know what you're going to ask me.
Do you like red chili or green chili? So what was your preference?
I'm trying to think if I should answer it, but green. I like green.
Green chili. Sounds good. All right. With that, I'll hand it over to Professor Adhikari and Wang, and then they'll start their own question they may have that I may have missed, or get something from the chat line. So here we go, Jingjing and Prakash.
Thank you.
All right. Okay. Thank you, Dr. Bohara.
Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Pagan, for such an enlightening talk.
Welcome.
We do have some questions here from Dr. Muhammad. Let me scroll down. I think there were at least 2 questions. You can see the chat window here, actually. What kind of pilot funding opportunities that we could explore, for example, right? For early career researchers, faculty members, do you suggest we start with localized projects at the state level, maybe at the county level, or we shoot for the star right from the beginning?
more than geographic location or anything is this funding source, right? So the low-hanging fruit is going to be like your dean, your school having some. Many times they struggle to actually have enough people applying for programs. So if they say that we'll give you $5,000, $2,000 to do something, apply, get that, give it to a student or buy some data, and then go from there. You could spend time working with depends on what you're doing, right? Doing community work, you have to be very efficient. So you need to talk to mentors at your school, in your field, to understand the culture of the institution. So if you know that your department values analysis of secondary data and you're spending your time working in the community, and that takes a lot of time, that may not be the best thing you do at the beginning, So I think time management is critical at that stage too.
Excellent, thank you. And then he has another question here. Under the cold calls, I guess the first conversation is talking about the problem, then sharing ideas about the possibility of collaborate. Is this the approach you would encourage based on your experience? Just curious.
Yeah, so I was talking about that because like foundations, for example, would have themes, that they're interested in. and they'll have program officers around those teams. So it could be a foundation that is interested in covering the uninsured. So you can contact the program officer and say, hey, you know, I want to talk to you about that. And then you tell them about a problem in your community or questions you may have. And then based on that, you'll have enough information to tailor your pitch to that foundation. Or they're going to tell you, we're not funding anything, but go talk to from another foundation. Okay, perfect. That's a lot more than you knew before you made that call, right? Because they know each other, you know, they talk to each other. They may be funding the same people. But it's not going to be obvious to you, to the researcher.
And I think I had one more question from him about the title of the book, of course, Proof.
Rejection Proof.
Yeah. And I think he had a question, one more. How many grant proposals on average you submit per year?
Oh, I don't know. It's now I try to get, I don't know, 5 or 6 every year, working in collaboration with different people, I'm department chair, so I try, there's certain areas that I'm interested in, so I work on larger proposals if I can. But before, I've worked in research. I work at a place called the New York Academy of Medicine, and that's all we did. So we would do like, I don't know, like 15 a year, something crazy like that. But it's because it's all soft money. So you're shooting in every direction to pay the salaries of your staff. If you're in healthcare, in a soft money environment, people send like a proposal in every cycle of NIH. So 3 times a year, they send at least one. Or you should always have. The thing that I've learned is like, okay, so if you hit 80%, 90%, I'm sorry, if you have a hit rate of 10%, 20%, then you pretty much know that, let's say if you send 10 proposals, you're going to hit one. So if you want to get one, you have to send 10 out, you know, in a way.
Excellent. Thanks so much. I'm going to pass it on to Jingjing. I do have some of my questions. I'll come back to that later.
Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hello.
Sure. Thank you, Prakash, and thank you, Jose. That's really insightful talk. And we don't have any more questions in the chat, so I'll just be selfish here and ask my own questions. One thing you mentioned is, when you started your tenure track position in Texas, you got the opportunity to work with a colleague in the sociology department, right? That's like how you started learning those funding side and how to collaborate with people outside your field. So I'm just wondering, can you share some of your experience or tips about, the challenges and benefits about collaborating across disciplinaries, and just any tips for new or early career people here?
I mean, I think when you work in groups, in teams, it's like that tendency to do it all because you were trained in a highly technical field, how to get away from that, so that if you work with somebody in sociology, political science, nursing, it doesn't matter the area, that you leverage their expertise in that area. That's why you want to work with them. You don't want to play armchair sociologist or armchair social worker. The whole point of having them in the team is for them to do that part. And then as you learn, then you may dabble a little bit on it. But even then, so for example, the work that I did, like I mentioned, I was trained very well at UNM on how to use certain software and how to present data and so on. And I stuck with that. And then over time, that gave me an opportunity to learn about problems because you have to read the literature, you contribute to a paper, and then you become more sophisticated on your knowledge on a problem.
Right, exactly.
So your first paper, all you're doing is explaining odds ratios. Your second paper, you may be getting into the mechanism as to how diabetes may impact employment, and so on.
That's an excellent point. And regarding how to reach out to private foundations, I must say that's really insightful to me, because I just started to explore opportunities associated with private organizations or foundations. And I was thinking, I'm going to send out just 2 pages, say, here's what I'm going to do. Can you give me money? So like your tip really helps here. And
yeah, find out in your school, in your university, who has contacts at that foundation too, who is being funded by them.
Right. So I've already have some of those contact information, and I figured out, the staff actually moved from foundations to foundations, just as you just pointed out. So they actually have probably have more knowledge than us in terms of whether funding can be funded. And a minor question I had was, there are just different levels of foundations here. Like which ones would you suggest we should start from? So there are big foundations like the Robert Johnson Foundation. There's also some localized foundations here.
I think I would look at if I see, it's like when you give advice to a student, right? If what they're looking for sounds like you, that's the one you should go for. So if you see a call for proposals that they're looking, you read it and you go like, wow, that's exactly what I'm doing.
Right.
Then that's the one that, more than being national or local, or
okay,
because your chances are more likely that they'll be interested in what you're doing.
got you.
If
So
you feel
the
like you're-
theme
yeah
is more important, and the
Yeah.
fit. Okay.
If you're doing telehealth during the pandemic and you see a call for proposals that says send me proposals about telehealth during the pandemic, that's the one you should go for. Yeah.
Awesome. Thank you. And I think there's a couple more questions pop up in the chat window. Let's see. I think Sakib had another question, right? So what suggestions you have for young faculty members at universities that are not at R1 universities?
I mean, that was my experience.
If I can add one more thing to that, right? So because most of us here, except for UNM, I believe a lot of us, including me, are at a 3 colleges, universities, right? And then with that, as you might know, comes the institutional bias. When you submit your proposals, your grants, some things. I mean, in these days and age, it's almost impossible to be, unanimous. I mean,
partner.
Yeah, it's harder. Where it's coming from.
Partner.
Yeah.
No. I mean, like I work with colleagues at a teaching school now that not teaching, it's research teaching, but there are biases because people are going to look at resources available to do anything at the institution, and they'll be like, well, can they do it from there? So are there other organizations that can help you with that? And then they can maybe able to help you. I got a grant from, it was about breast cancer screening in South Texas, and it was about, and I did it with the University of Pennsylvania, and it would drive me crazy when they would score my university low and them high within the same proposal. But it got funded in part because they knew that the people that I was working with were known in the field, and they were mentors that help out. So that helped a lot.
There was one more question, Jingjing. Do you want to from Dr. Upadhyay?
Oh yeah, sure. This is a different one. So how did you transition from being a researcher to being the chair of the department? So do you enjoy being chair because you get to interact with a lot of more folks, or do you miss being in the thick of research?
The grass is always greener at the other side of the fence, right? So, I mean, I remember what I said, like if you get invited to a party, you show up, or to an event. That's similar to the way I did it, which is like a place was looking for a department chair, and it never occurred to me that I could do it. And we're not trained to be department chairs. We're trying to do research and teach, right? And I had managed students and a few faculty members just for 10% of their time on a project. So I knew I could do it. And the opportunity came up, and I just did it. I applied and did it, and I ended up liking it. Many times you don't think you like aspects of a job like that. And I did it in Texas, then went total research, and then at NYU, they were looking for a chair at that point again. And then that was easier because I knew what I was walking into. The institution is big, it's different, but the job is basically about, I'm going to use the term having common sense, because you have to, and having patience, because you're dealing with problems that come up, and you have to have patience and have some ability to be fair in how you distribute resources and all that. And if you find that you yourself have those skills, because I don't know, maybe you did it in your family or with friends when you were playing football outside or soccer, or then you may have it because it's something that you just, you develop or you have, and it may help you well. I like both. I like managing and leading, and I like working on my own projects, and the intellectual stimulation or I don't know, benefit that you get from solving problems and doing things that you consider important, right? So don't shy away from that. Many times we shy away from leadership positions, You have to know when you do it, I should say. So for example, if you're getting started and you know that in your 3-year review, they're going to be looking at research, which is the case in most schools, even a school that values teaching, they'll want you to do more research at the beginning, then you focus on that. And then you start transitioning. I think people get into trouble when it's time for them to play leadership roles, especially if they're in a small school, and then they don't do it because then they come across as like not good citizens. No, I don't want to be undergraduate advisor. Well, somebody has to do it, there are only like 4 of you. So, but you don't want to do it at the beginning. You want to do it at the right time. See what I'm saying?
Right, those are excellent points. Thank you so much, Jose, for sharing.
Yes, you're welcome.
So Prakash, I remember you said you had a couple questions yourself, so I just switch it back to you.
Okay, thank you, Jingjing. Yes, I do have a question about, I think you already answered the question about coping with rejections. You just have to get used to it, right? And I don't think that's how I've been dealing with it. 80% rejection, that sounds much better than what I'm dealing with. But yeah, if you can, how do you really deal with that, right? The aftermath of, sometimes, if you combine the institutional bias and then people know where it's coming from, and the rejection and the comments, it always makes you feel like quit and go back to Puerto Rico, right? Sometimes.
Well, I mean, you just have to keep going and don't take it personal, because it's not personal. I can tell you that. A reviewer is looking, they don't know who you are. They're looking at your project, and I think you have to have the ability to sit down and say, what? You obviously probably did. Anybody that submits something, if they're careful about it, then I did everything that I could to send the best proposal. That's the first step I do. Like, I feel good about myself if I know I did everything I could up to this point. But then after the reviews come back, you're going to notice, well, yes, I didn't explain this well. So you don't take it as, oh, they didn't understand what I was saying. They're not intelligent. It's you. It's always you, as a person. I've seen proposals, just to give you a very concrete example, where you're discussing a project and things that you think people should know. Like, let's say, if you're in health, everybody knows what the National Health Interview Survey is in the US and HIS. And I've been in projects where people start asking, this is in a specialized area, where people say, well, what does he mean, or she means, or. So you see, you make assumptions about what people know that many times they're not right. So you have to go back and say, okay, next time I have to explain better what this is. How was the data collected? And then you improve upon that. You keep, you get other people also to look at it and give you feedback, especially senior people, or, and then you address the changes. You have to address the changes in a paper, anything like that. Even in a paper or a proposal that gets rejected, you may not see this, but the likelihood that the same reviewer will read it again is actually pretty high. The world is actually very small. So if you get a paper, if you send a paper, this happened to me actually. I sent a paper out, I got it rejected. This is a time where you would get a paper copy. And then I sent it to another journal and it got rejected. And then the reviewer sent the same letter from the first time with the name of the first editor. And I wrote back to the editor. I said, well, look, you didn't even read the review, it wasn't even to you, it went to the previous editor. And you know what he asked me? He said, did you address the comments? And I said, yes, I did. And it made me think every time, like, every time you get comments, you don't have to address all of them, but if you get 3 reviews and 3 of them say there's a problem, most likely there's a problem on that. If it's only one person, then you have to make a judgment call there. You fix it and then you send it somewhere else. Same with a proposal, which you can sort of like keep working on. Because what's going to happen is if you don't do it, the problem is going to keep popping up, and then you'll be more frustrated. So anyway, that's something that I've learned on that. And then leave enough time to address the changes and so on. So it's hard work, but you already know that, all of you, right? So I at the beginning, I would get rejected a lot, like really, really on everything I did. And one thing that I learned was I noticed that, like I said earlier, I wrote in a highly technical way, and I wasn't explaining what I wanted to do. And then I learned that, let's say that I asked you for a page. You're writing a page on a project or 5 pages. There's some things that may be obvious to you. Let's say if your area is econometrics, then you probably don't have to show off how much econometrics you know, because the person that is reading it will know by just looking at your resume that you know what you're talking about. So you can be like less technical. Ironically, you can be less technical because people will know who you are. It would be like, I learned this when I applied for fellowships, let's say it's a fellowship that targets minority populations in the US, Latinos. I don't have to explain that I am Latino that hard because it's obvious in my application. I'm wasting pages if I do that. I should explain more about other things because some things may be obvious. And that I found useful too. There are many things in a project, in a paper, in a project that you're wasting your space, that people will understand that you can do it. So you might as well just talk about something else. Anyway, that's just a general tip there. So instead of saying I'm going to do these equations on that, I change my language to these are the steps that I'm going to do. I'm going to do this equation, but I don't have to state the equation and waste space there, I could just explain it in words how it would happen. And one thing that I also did is I did a fellowship. I did a postdoc for 2 years at Penn. So I spent a year just watching how they did it. And that changed my life. Because I was able to spend time I would sit in a room and then say, I want to work on this project. And I would see these two people that are very successful talk about it and work on it. And that's when I got many ideas on how to write by just watching them explain what goes into a proposal and what doesn't.
Thank you. That was
Yes.
super helpful. Thanks a lot.
Yeah.
I'm sure, we have young scholars coming up here, and
Yeah.
this is going to be super helpful as they start their ladder. Jingjing, back to you. There's a question from Kusbu if you want to take it.
Yes.
Yeah, sure. So Jose, here's another question.
Yes.
As early career faculty in a liberal arts college with small department, it's usually difficult to get seniors to review grant proposals. I mean, maybe just in advance, right? So as they may not have extensive experience as well. So how would you approach seniors from other institutions instead?
I don't know if you can go back to your mentor, advisor, and then maybe they can help you network through that, because you may feel, you just need to find, one thing that many of the mentors may know is a lot of people. And sometimes we assume that because, like, for example, just because I do health economics and health services research doesn't mean that because I've been around for a long time, I may be able to know people in political science. So you just have to ask. And I'll be like, well, it happens that I know Professor X at this school because we were in a committee Y and Z. And that's what those networks can be very deep and broad. And that's what I would do. Go back to the chair. The chairs tend to know, or go back to your dissertation chair or senior people in your institution that could do that. If that doesn't work, then you go and you can contact people directly, but do it in a way that it doesn't come across as it's about me and homework for them, because then it's just, you have to make it very easy for them to help you. Everybody likes to be praised about what they do. So maybe that may be one way. Hey, you don't have to overdo it, but you could say, hey, I read your paper on this topic and it's interesting, or I know you do work in this area. Can we spend a few minutes chatting about something? Or instead of telling them, can you read my 20-page proposal the first time you meet them?
Yeah, I think the pandemic has made this especially challenging for early career faculty at liberal arts colleges, because typically they can go to conferences and meet those people, right? And this is just new challenge during this special time. And thanks a lot for sharing that, Jose. Yeah.
Sometimes, well, so it's with writing proposals. Are you talking about proposals for like larger proposals, or just any proposal, I guess?
It sounds like just general grant proposals.
Okay. Yeah, sometimes universities have resources where they would pay someone to do that. So you may want to find out. And they may contact a senior person and say, can you give some feedback on this? That typically not liberal arts schools, more like medical schools and so on do that. Like they won't allow like a proposal to go out without having somebody that pre-reviewed it, and they may pay the person some amount to review it. That's useful. There are people out there that do. I used one person for a while that was she was in biology, and every proposal that I would write, I would give it to her to edit, just to give me feedback. and she had a consultant firm on that, but I haven't used it in a long time. But sometimes that's useful, because what you have to think about is like they're in the business of like reading many of this. So they may have tips on how to put together a table, how to put pictures that are important, or visuals, and if you get invited to review, I think it's eye-opening. If you get invited to review anything, you should do it, because you can see the dynamics. You get a sense of what is it that reviewers are looking for, and it varies a whole lot by agency, by the field of study that the person comes from. NIH is the best one. I mean, it's great. NSF invites people to do it. I think you can contact them, right? I think you may be able to contact them and say, can I
right,
be a
yeah, yeah.
reviewer? Yeah.
Sometimes the program director actually sometimes is looking for new reviewers. So you can either nominate yourself, or you can ask your mentor or some senior faculty to nominate you. That's I've seen that before. Yeah.
Yeah. And
NSF sends out this email soliciting reviewers. So yeah, that's right.
Yeah, and it's sometimes it's hard because it's a whole day, and it's not like they pay you or they pay you like a whole lot. So, but you just do it. You just have to do it.
And it's a good networking opportunity also at those panels.
Yes. I mean, yes, they may know your name, and your name may come in, and it may not be it. Nobody may talk about the fact that they know who you are, but they'll know who you are. I don't know how else to put it.
That's a good way to put it.
yeah, that's what happens. No, I've seen situations where proposals that are not well developed get the benefit of the doubt because somebody says, well, but we know them and we know they do good work. And you go like, what are you talking about? But it's just, no matter how objective those panels, they want them to be, they're never fully objective, And that's why I'm saying that, like, if you put together a proposal on a topic, if you can get experts in the field to be part of it, it increases your chances because people know that you can get help.
Now, if I may, I'm sorry.
Yes.
Right there is the point I was raising earlier, right? That institutional bias and this reputation bias. For some of us, being in a liberal arts small college, right, we never get a chance to be associated with those big names.
So I found that the way that I did it actually when I was in South Texas, it's a relatively small school, and there were programs from NIH and Department of Defense that funded my school. So they only targeted my school. So I had a Fulbright grant, for example, but it was only a it was a Fulbright grant that targeted border institutions, and that's the way that I got a Fulbright grant. I wasn't competing against people that wanted to go to Paris or London, which are probably the toughest places to get in. And the same with NIH. NIH has many programs that only target certain schools. NSF has that too. So that's actually, this is a good tip. Let's say that you have undergraduates that you want to work on a project that the way that I would fund my work at the beginning was by training faculty and students. I got $1.5 million from the Department of Defense to train people in health services research. And that was it. It was a training grant. But what I did is I would write it in a way that I was able to train students and faculty, but I would fund my work that way. Because I knew that if I applied to a large research grants from NIH, I would not get it from there. And then I got two like that, Agency for Healthcare Research and Quality, it was R24, and then Department of Defense had money like that. They had a breast cancer research program. And NIH has certain programs that apply only to certain schools, so, and NSF. And I've seen this I had a colleague at historically Black college and university in the South, that's what he was doing. He was in a business school and he was training students, undergrads, and that's the way he would fund his research. You gotta get started somewhere, so that's one approach. And that will make you feel good about yourself, by the way, if you're doing that too, so. Yes.
Well, thank you so much. I think we are at the last 4 minutes. I'm going to turn it back to Dr. Bohara. Jingjing, unless you had a question. Okay, thank you.
You're muted, Dr. Bohara. Dr. Bohara.
Hi, Alok, you are on mute.
You're still muted.
There we go.
Sorry. Anyway, thank you, Jose,
Yeah.
for this wonderful time. I think we learned quite a bit. You gave a lot of inside tips, your experience. Hopefully in the future, if we came up with some idea to pick your brain, would you be willing to participate again in the future?
Of course.
Thank you. With that, I would like to invite Saqib to come on and, kind of wrap it up.
Yeah, first of all, Professor Jose Pagan, is very fascinating to hear your experience and your suggestions, your recommendations. And especially I like that, those are key words you use: cold calls, how to the approaches, never give up, and create a rejection buffer kind, get used to it, and you also provided a very good suggestion. In fact, I got today morning, I got a letter from the Energy Economics Journal, and it looks like 2 referees are fine with the paper, 1 referee is not. But you have mentioned this is a good sign. That means you can work something out and get that published. But if all 3 referees say no, then it's sounds trouble, right? So these are very helpful tips, and looks like sometimes we get into that idea that why I'm getting good amount of rejections, but we don't realize there are people facing the same scenario. And especially when you shared your rejection rate, I was actually, wow, if you get that kind of 80% rejection, then we all can relate, and never give up. I think that is the key that what you suggested, and very helpful tips. And definitely we would love to pick your brain, and as Professor Bohara mentioned, as a consortium, we like to approach some interdisciplinary grants. Maybe if it's something with public health or global health issues, maybe definitely we would love to. If it's okay with you,
Let me know. I mean, because like I said, our school has been there are only like 2 or 3 schools of global public health around in the U.S. And we're one of them. So you would be surprised at how many projects people have all over the world for that reason, because we tend to attract faculty that are interested in doing global work or international work. And this place is growing. Like the pandemic means that enrollment in schools of public health have gone up, and we have gone up even faster than most schools.
Right.
So
thank you, Professor Pagan. It's a very good information, and we also have interdisciplinary young scholars. If you think that, okay, I'm looking for a group here, interdisciplinary, if you're thinking from your end, we are here as well.
I will.
If you want to help young scholars interdisciplinary, we have all kinds of background here, I can tell you. So, if we can do something.
And by the way, they're from all over the world.
All over the world, yeah.
So China, Nepal, India, Bangladesh, you name it. And American, they're all here. So if you ever need a global consortium, we got it.
I will keep that in mind. I think that would be wonderful.
Yeah.
Yep.
Then thank you again. Thank you again on behalf of our entire group here, and especially Mandy. I don't know Mandy is here. Probably she has to. Oh yeah, okay. Mandy is also here. Right?
Yeah.
She did all the work to make sure we have this program going on, and I want to thank Prakash ji, Jingjing, Professor Bohara, and actually, but this idea actually came from Professor Bohara. Like, let's invite people who can help us, guide us, and we're glad that you agreed and you enlightened us, and we look forward to work with you, Professor Pagan. Thank you.
I do too. Take care and bye.
Okay, thank you very much. Appreciate it.